What's happening there, Reject Nation? We are going to watch today from New Rockstars, the Moonknight Episode 1 Easter Eggs and Breakdown. If you haven't seen a reaction, it's up on the channel. Of course, New Rockstars, the best in the biz. And before we proceed any further, a couple of things I gotta mention. First thing is, you might hear some more background noise than usual. AC currently not working in our place, and we wanted to crack the window open, but unfortunately, they're doing a lot of construction outside. Secondly, I already ordered a new Rockstars Moonknight shirt, so ha 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 to all of you, but especially you. Okay.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel's Moonknight Episode 1 as we meet our hero grappling with dissociative identity disorder, and one of those identities possessed by an Egyptian moon deity, which gives us all a new cover story for when we obliterate our friends' bathrooms. I swear it was Khonshu shit in the tub. As we always do here at New Rockstars, we're gonna break this down in depth because unlike other MCU titles, Moonknight is less about the Marvel Easter eggs than it is truly impressive cinematic details that make this series a fascinating mystery and character exploration. The episode opens not with the hero, but with the villain, Arthur Harrow. Tattooed on his arm are scales head in the mouths of crocodiles, those croc heads also on the head of his staff, for the Egyptian deity he serves, Ammit, a funeral figure associated with judgment, seen with the head of a crocodile, front legs of a lion, and hindquarters of a hippopotamus. The Egyptians believe that when you die, the god of the dead, Anubis, weighs your heart on scales against the weight of a feather, and if it weighs more, you are fed to Ammit. Ammit was not worshipped as a god per se, but feared by Egyptians as the devourer of the dead, dooming them if they didn't adhere to the principle of Ma'at, which referred to a way of life that pursued truth and balance and justice. Philosophically, there's actually a lot in common here with Thanos, another MCU villain with a religious zeal to cull all of life by half. But whereas Thanos saw fairness in randomness, Harrow and his disciples believed that one's soul should be judged on its merits, past, present, and future. At least you can imagine in a post-Thanos society, one's fate being determined by a bit more order is a cult mentality Kool-Aid flavor more folks would like the taste of.
First off, we gotta see Ammit. That would be amazing.
Oh yeah.
If we could get that character into the actual series, I would absolutely love that. Hopefully it's not a CGI mess. It would be cool to actually get
what
that.
you wish for.
But it would be cool to actually bring that to life. Secondly, I mean, yeah, that's part of why I think this god that they worship is such a fascinating one, because it creates such a moral complexity. Like, can you really judge someone and determine whether their soul is worthy of still existing on this earth based on the future?
Minority Report.
And is the future like set in stone? Is it a estimation?
How does this account for the multiverse and the various branches that can be caused by different decision making? Is it just on this timeline that your soul is unworthy?
Yeah, it's true. How does this factor to the Eternals, the TVA, everything else?
In his ritual, he shatters a glass and then puts the broken pieces in his sandals, walking on them with bare feet. Now, walking on broken glass is a real meditative practice, but Harrow hides this inside his shoes, spending the whole day enduring great pain, but telling no one. This tells us that he is not doing this for show. He is a true believer. And the music we hear is Bob Dylan's Every Grain of Sand, one of Dylan's 80s spiritual tracks recorded after he found Jesus, became a born-again Christian. Kind of like how Arthur Harrow sees himself as a reborn evangelist. Every Grain of Sand refers to how Dylan saw the master's hand in every tiny particle of nature. And for Harrow, in every person, he sees Ammit's judgment. That could be another reason he walks on this broken glass. With every step, he pulverizes this glass back into grains of sand. Because that's what glass is. It's sand when it's superheated. The Marvel Studios title card.
Oh, that's clever. That's really clever.
The Eternals can be seen on the inside of the
Hey now.
pocket. And by the way,
finally,
back where Peter Parker was in the No Way Home title card, because Peter can only appear in live-action titles that Sony approves of. And by approves of, I mean get some money to pay for their poopy vampire movies. And the music changes from Bob Dylan to Engelbert Humperdinck's A Man Without Love, which is about a man who wakes up every day realizing he's alone. The first line actually juxtaposes Stephen's inability to remember his past love, Layla, and the third line reflects how Moonlight now shows him the way via his new soulmate, one that he is not yet aware of, Khonshu, the Egyptian moon deity. And we meet Stephen Grant. Now in the comics, Stephen Grant is actually the second identity of Marc Spector. Marc is really the main figure, the badass mercenary that we start with, and Stephen is a new identity he adopts, that of an elite billionaire. But I assume this series changed Stephen to this awkward museum employee to avoid the Batman Bruce Wayne comparisons. Because when Moon Knight first came out in the Marvel Comics, a lot of people considered him Marvel's Batman.
Well, it's a fascinating choice that they actually made with this, because I've only read one series of Moon Knight. I've read a bunch. It was one that was illustrated by Greg Smallwood back in, I think, 2016. And that one, in the backstory of Marc Spector, the identity's formed at such a young age, and he kind of grew up with, both Jake Lockley, which is one of the personalities, and Stephen Grant as well. Where in this show, it's like he's meeting them for the first time. So I'm wondering what direction this show will actually go down. I'm like, oh, they have always been there, and he suppressed them, forgot who they are. Is Mark the dominant personality still? There's a lot to really unpack, and I like how they really flipped it on its head.
Now, behind Stephen's bed as he awakes are a number of texts on world history and architecture, ancient Egypt, etc. These books hovering over his head as he sleeps reflect how his dreams, or what he thinks are his dreams, take him back to that world. Now, in the foreground, you can see his Rubik's Cube completed, which is interesting because while trying to stay awake, Stephen intentionally fiddles with it and tosses it, never finishing it, suggesting that when the Mark identity takes over, he might go ahead and solve the Rubik's Cube.
That's the first thing Mark does.
I gotta get this done, otherwise I won't be able to focus on my Khonshu work.
Before I go to the Alps? Wait, Khonshu. Let me just solve this Rubik's Cube really fast.
I'll be there.
Then I'll go.
We see how he strapped his leg to the bed and surrounded himself with sand, all as a kind of sleepwalking security measure. But his first real step forward of the day is his bare foot on sand, which the camera lingers on, showing he is more connected to the sands of Egypt than Harrow, whose first step of his day is a large
dude.
glass.
Great.
Dude, you're blowing my mind, because I did not actually know that's where glasses. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
I didn't actively be like, oh, he's grinding it down into sand, but yeah.
But I think that's cool, especially with the show that you're so much with reflections and mirroring, to then mirror that with our main character and the antagonist as well so early on upon the introduction. My mind actually never caught up to that. I didn't know that.
The last episode, Mark's just going to be there filling his shoes with sand then.
His goldfish Gus has only one working fin, like Nemo, a comparison the pet store owner later invokes. But with one working fin, this poor guy is literally swimming in circles just like Stephen is. And you can see at the bottom of the fish tank is lined with a pyramid, King Tut's head, an Egyptian obelisk, and a sunken boat. He talks to his mother on the phone, probably talking to no one.
Hello, Mum. It's me. Just checking in. I got your postcard. Putting it up on Gus's tank now.
Now, assuming Stephen's mother doesn't really exist, is he sending himself these postcards? Is Mark sending them to Stephen to help keep him in that dormant routine? Later on,
does he have a mother personality?
A rack of postcards, so perhaps this is where he's getting the postcards that he is mailing to himself. He says goodbye to his mom by saying...
Oh man, that's interesting.
Sorry, I missed you, Mum. I'll try again tomorrow. Later, Gators.
Latest Gators.
Of course, crocodiles are different from alligators. We talked about this in Loki, but it will be later that he faces this taxonomic order of reptiles. But also, this all poses the question, if Stephen Grant is just another identity of Marc Spector, who does Stephen think he is talking on the phone to? Is he just leaving voicemails with a random number? Is there a voice inbox that Marc Spector set up to help Stephen along with this charade? It's just interesting how all of Stephen's closest relationships are people who cannot talk back to him, like the street performer Crawley. Now behind that bus is a building marked Atlantis Island, maybe not to Marvel's Atlantis, home of Namor, or maybe just another building called Atlantis.
Yes.
They actually shot all the London exteriors in Budapest. So later when we see
Budapest
to be London's National Museum of Art, the architecture is actually that of Budapest's Museum of Fine Arts. They used VFX to swap out the Hungarian for English. And this museum is first shown a reflection of a puddle that Stephen steps through. Reflections and mirrored surfaces are a recurring motif in this series, all of way of showing how Stephen connects with his other identities. Stephen catches a girl stuffing her gum in a mini pyramid of Giza.
It's not like there's anything in there.
Yeah, maybe not. But in there, something wicked.
A line foreshadowing in two ways. Of course, the wicked jackal that Stephen will flee in this museum later, but also trailer footage suggests that Stephen or Mark will explore the Great Pyramids of Giza, and they might find something inside of them. Also, something wicked is quoted in Shakespeare's Macbeth, the witches who say, "By the pricking of my tongue, something wicked this way comes." shoes. In the play, the witches are foreseeing a monster of
love
their
it.
own making.
Witch
and
Eric always.
Just like how for Stephen, the hero of this story, the monster is currently inside of him. He explains the Egyptian burial ritual and how their hearts were judged, and the girl responds with,
And did it suck for you? Getting rejected from the field of reeds?
Well, that don't make sense, because I'm not dead, am I?
Stevie.
Am I?
yeah,
Am I?
Second, am I? That Oscar Isaac sneaks in, showing how this girl triggered his recent lapses with reality. Even now, he doesn't know if he's alive or dead. Also, weird question for that girl to ask. I don't trust that kid. Later, he hands her the stuffed hippos, then moves to a box containing the stuffed lions and the stuffed crocodiles.
Oh.
Together, these three are the anatomical components of Emmet. He points
That's
to
awesome.
a flaw on the poster.
The Ennead, you know, like the super group of Egyptian gods. You know, you got Horus, Osiris, Tefnut, Shu.
Stop.
There's been a major blunder because they've got 7 gods here, and the Ennead has 9.
Now, he is correct that the Ennead of Egyptian mythology has 9 members. The sun god Atum, his children Shu and Tefnut, their children Geb and Nut.
Eric
and then
remembered
their
all this.
children, Osiris, Isis, and
He just knew it.
Nephthys. And then sometimes the Ennead
Egyptologist
includes Horus, son of
fucks.
Osiris and Isis. But this poster also lists Hathor, the sky goddess, who is not usually listed among the Ennead, despite being a very important deity who, we should note, mates with Khonshu, the moon deity, to enable
yeah.
creation.
Helen Mirren!
Yeah, bring her in.
Helen Mirren
Well,
and F. Murray Abraham getting it on an Egyptian
Right,
form.
man. Use a little nepotism to get her on the Ennead there. You know, hey, you're with me. You're a god now. You're one of the big gods now.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Egyptian gods begging. That's why Khonshu's so upset, people.
He's got blue balls. Blue moon balls.
Take it out on everyone else until I get my woman back.
Based on promo material, we will likely see the 9 members of the Ennead in their human avatars later this season. Steven chats
Wow.
with his gold-painted street performer listed in the credits as Crawley. Now in the comics, Bertrand
Oh,
Crawley is a
shit.
homeless man in New York who serves as an informant to Moonknight. He walks around posing as a British aristocrat. We get another awesome
No
puddle
way.
mirror here.
Nice.
As Steven says goodbye to Crawley, what we initially think is right side up is actually upside down when a leaf drops on the puddle on the top half of the frame.
That's pretty cool. And that could just be the way, kind of like how Hawkeye did that with that one.
Grills, yeah.
Grills, yeah, where it's like, let's just give him that character name, but he's not actually going to be a portrayal of that. But it seems very intentionally placed that it would be Crawley.
And it seems like he would be in a perfect position to fill that role in this new statue form.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We passed this scene, and I want to point this out with the girl, but he doesn't remember setting up a date with her.
Yeah.
I'm going to give credit. Heavy spoilers. Paul, he talked to me about this. Literally just a theory, but the theory was like, dude, it's mind-blowing. What he was telling me was Marc Spector, as established in the show, is married. He has a wife, Layla. So why would he be going on a date with this girl? Why would he ask her out? And wouldn't she pick up on the fact that Marc Spector has an American accent? So that other personality might have actually been Mark's other personality, Jake Lockley.
Lockley.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Like,
good
that
clue.
would've been a
Hey.
hit to it.
That would make that scene make a lot more sense.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it make a lot more sense? Yeah.
As Stephen tries to stay awake, in his textbook, there's a mention of the Great Rift, gods turn away from man, which feels like it's setting up this show's mythology with Khonshu and the 9 Ennead members' relationship to mankind. We're
Maybe.
essentially adding a new
Maybe.
layer to the MCU plan of implying all gods of human society from the history we know are interwoven with the Marvel mythology, as we saw with the Asgardians' connections with Norse mythology and the Eternals' connections with all other forms of mythology. We have yet to see how the Christian religion ties into all of that, but my friends, Mephisto is coming. This textbook is supposed to be
then
showing
Jesus.
the familial lineage of the Ennead. Even if it's going youngest to oldest, it does seem a bit out of order. It's just a bit odd to list Osiris first, whatever order you would go in. But remember, all of this is through the eyes of Stephen, who's certainly knowledgeable about Egyptian mythology, but he does have an unstable mind. He is an unreliable narrator, a point of view character through whom we are not seeing objective reality necessarily. So who knows how much of this presented reality is actually real and how much of it is going to be revealed as a fantasy at some point. He tosses up his Rubik's Cube and he suddenly finds himself face down, jaw dislocated in the hills beside an alpine village. This is actually shot in Slovenia. So apparently when Stephen fell asleep, Marc Spector Spector took over, went to the Alps to steal the scarab from this castle, then leapt out the window, and Stephen woke up on the ground. A voice speaks to him.
Go back to sleep, worm.
Yes, this is F. Murray Abraham as Khonshu. Interesting that he calls Stephen the worm, as if Stephen is the invasive critter that does not belong inside the mind. Khonshu, of course, the Egyptian moon deity, possessed Marc Spector, choosing him as his avatar, giving Marc supernatural powers, but he has less control over Marc's Stephen identity. In his pocket, he finds a golden scarab with Egyptian hieroglyphics. You can actually see a closer look at these in the closing credits of the episode. We did our best to translate these, but they do contain a mix of known alphabet symbols and then other unknown ones. The right and the left halves of the scarab are mirrored, so if you look at the dividing line in the middle and go to the column to the right of that, at the top of that, that is a reed, which translates to either an E or an I beside a seated figure. Beneath that, there's a scarab shape, then the open mouth, that's an R, then another I beside a different seated figure, then a pair of figures. The column to the right of that is topped with the quail chick, that represents the U or the W, followed by another I. Beneath that, the vulture, that's an A, and then a figure I don't recognize that looks like either a boat, or maybe an oil lamp, and then the horned viper, that represents F, and then another figure I don't recognize. I'm gonna keep working on this, folks, but all you Egyptologists out there.
Bunch of question marks.
For effort. Indiana Jones meets Fight Club, and already you're seeing the parallels there, of
Definitely.
course, especially Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, which had a whole set piece in a Germanic castle. But by sticking with one man's point of
You're
view,
Scottish lords and I'm Mickey Mouse.
Switch into a totally different context is something that we've seen actually in Christopher Nolan's Memento, which is also told in a non-linear narrative structure that reflected the mind of the protagonist who suffered from short-term memory loss. It resulted in him finding himself in intense moments with no knowledge of how he got there. Similarly, the FX series Legion, which actually follows the Marvel mutant of David Haller, also explores the intersection of superpowers with mental health struggles and leaves the viewer never quite sure of what is real or not. Interesting how in the scene all the
WandaVision
shooters
too.
speak in English.
Certain extent.
Just a little indicator that these men in their matching clothes are likely not native to this alpine town, but rather, like many cults in the real world, move to these places to just kind of like take the town over with their interesting Rajneeshni outfits. Stephen pulls a Harrison Ford fugitive maneuver by joining the procession with some headgear to blend in. In this case, it's his white hoodie, white being the color of Moonknight's wardrobe. Arthur Harrow parts the crowd, showing his long blown out hair. Now, Harrow in the comics is really a one-off villain from one issue in 1985, a guy with a half paralyzed face carrying out some Nazi experiments in Mexico. Really, I think this guy's gonna have a deeper identity that gets revealed later in the series.
His character's already much deeper.
Absolutely.
The one episode.
Yeah.
Later he'll have a deeper identity. That later has way past. We are way past later.
Once you have him for more than one episode, he's already way off beyond where they had him in the comics.
Ethan Hawke said his version of the character is based on David Koresh, leader of the Christian cult, the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. One follower submits himself for judgment.
I judge you in Amit's name with but a fraction of her power.
The tattoo scales sync with the swinging of the staff, which turn green to signal a balanced soul. Meanwhile, the old woman, the tattoo turns red, with one scale having a larger pile weighing it down.
I've been good my entire life.
I believe you, but the scales see everything. Perhaps it's something that lies ahead.
And so he drains her life force, leaving her skin gray. So Amit judges her by the sins she will commit in the future. And unless this is all bullshit, and let's be honest, it might be, this would be another example of destiny existing in the MCU. Something described in various ways by the Ancient One and He Who Remains in Loki. Like the TVA pruning young Sylvie, this woman is being punished for future violations. Both of these systems of justice cruelly denying the possibility of a multiverse where people can make infinitely different choices.
I'm still on the train of what the hell is this old woman gonna do in the future?
She's gonna massacre some people tomorrow.
She seems so old. How bad can it be of what she actually is gonna do?
What character change could she enact in herself to be that bad? Yeah.
Khonshu refuses to let Stephen hand over the scarab. Kudos to Oscar Isaac for his physical work here, the way he can divorce his head and his facial expressions from the rest of his body. And then when he marches away from Harrow, he takes these big dramatic steps, similar to the big strides the towering Khonshu himself would take. As they pry the scarab from him, Stephen flickers in and out of consciousness, coming to with blood on his face and fist. Just that amount of blood on the scarab in his palm is some of the gruesomest we've ever seen the MCU get, as it implies he may have had to rip off a few fingers to get that scarab out of their hands. He flees in a cupcake delivery van.
So violent, implied.
Cry for help as Stephen wishes to be woken up from this nightmare. The fact that this is playing on the radio, maybe just a bit of an ironic joke, or just like an interesting coincidence that one might see in a dream. Stephen Grant wakes up for this thinking it's a dream, but as we find out later, it's not not a dream. So why did such an ironic song play during it then? I just love how this show
Director's
blurs the
choice.
lines of what seems real and what seems fantasy. As he struggles against his pursuers, he flashes forward again and now finds the gun in his hand, the windshield blown out, the gunshot shattered the side window, and one of those pursuing cars flipping. I love how this whole scene plays out like a classic car chase, with one person steering, one person shooting, but with one man doing everything and only seeing half of it. Think how terrifying that would be. A logging truck overturns and he swerves around it, 2 more trucks wedge around him, and then Mark takes over again. Yeah, I like how on the transition out of it, you hear the gunshot, as if the gunshot is what woke Steven up. The gunshot that probably shot the driver of that sedan. But before the logs crush him, Steven wakes up, he thinks, back home. Presumably, Mark was able to get out of that somehow, made his way back to the UK, back into the apartment, back into bed. And a shot from behind proves this, showing Steven with reflections on either side of him, proving his truly split identity. Yet his leg harness, the sand ring, the door tape, all seemingly undisturbed. But think about it, if it was another identity taking over, not him sleepwalking, Mark would have been fully capable of avoiding the sand, replacing the tape himself. It's a huge pile of crumbled tape in that trash can. I highly doubt Steven counted all the wads.
You know, I just want to say too that there's been some people who have been kind of upset by that action sequence for not seeing the action. And I'm like, well, we'll get the action. You know we will.
Yeah.
We will get it. The whole point is to thrust you into the perspective of what Stephen Grant is going through. I've seen a lot of people feel like they cheated it.
No, it's going to be like Night and Day, where he blacks out every time there's an action scene.
That would be
You
great.
never
All
see-
6
Yeah,
episodes.
just every time. Let Mark deal with it off screen. Would save a lot of money, save a lot of time.
Multiple personalities, and we're only going to see it only from Stevens the entire time.
Yeah,
and
it's the-
never see the action scenes.
Gus now has a second fully functioning fin. As indicated by the pet store clerk, Mark, during that lapse period, must have replaced the goldfish, kind of like parents who replace kids' goldfish when the fish die and they hope the kids don't notice. Steven realizes he missed his date at the steak restaurant because it's Sunday, not Friday.
I'll have a steak, please.
Sure. What cut would you like?
I'll have the best bit of the steak. That's the bit that I want.
Center cut's fillet. How'd you like that?
Good. Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah.
I'll put you for well done.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Sounds delicious.
Oof, for anyone who eats steak, this is painful to watch. You never cook a fillet to be well done.
Yes,
You're ruining
sir.
it.
I'd rather eat poodle shit.
But obviously, Steven is a vegan, and Mark was the meat eater who picked this steakhouse to begin with. He finds some scratches on his apartment floor for where the tail was dragged over to access the hidden crawl space, and on the cell phone that he finds, all the calls are to Layla, except
for
one
Duchamp.
listing Ducamp.
Or
Jean-Paul
Ducamp.
Ducamp is a
Frenchie!
mercenary, an ex-French Foreign Legion officer who is a partner to Marc Spector in the comics. Mark's voice speaks to him, and he sees the reflection in the bathroom mirror shaking his head when Steven hadn't done so. He flees to the elevator, which stops mysteriously on an empty 3rd floor, and then again on the 2nd, where Khonshu lurches toward him from the end of the hall. Terrifying horror imagery here. As in the comics, Khonshu has a beaked skull and a crescent moon staff, and his limbs are wrapped in linen like a mummy, though I like how his tail wrappings seem to float as if detached from gravity. Just amazing character design here. Khonshu grabbing the lift door turns it into an elderly woman, but even that doesn't make total sense if you think about it, because if she was at the other end of the hall, she would be nowhere near the summoning button. And despite this elevator previously headed down from the 2nd floor, it's now back up on the 5th floor, where his elderly neighbor is visiting her friend, Claire? And we saw Steven repeatedly hit the button for the ground floor. It should not have gone back up to the 5th. Now, sure, this may just be the building's electrical problems that Steven alluded to, or maybe Khonshu screwing with him, but really, I think another example of how basic things in Steven's reality are not abiding by normal logic. Steven turns around and sees Khonshu right behind him. I love this close-up because you can see all the texturing and indentations on Khonshu's skull, like the little hairs wafting out from the back of it. But now when we whip pan to Steven's reaction, he's back on the bus, meaning from the 5th floor to now, Mark must have been in control. We see Khonshu standing on the street, but he disappears when the lamppost crosses frame. On his bus, Steven realizes as he hops off, Harrow was on that bus. So either Mark was pursuing, or more likely being pursued by Arthur Harrow before Steven regained control. Harrow and his followers corner Steven at the museum.
Had Ahmed been free, she would have prevented Hitler and the destruction he wrought. Nero, the Armenian genocide, Pol Pot.
Never talks about the snap.
Worst crimes against humanity, Harrow invokes the baby Hitler thought experiment. What if Hitler could have been prevented from becoming the mass murdering dictator? Something Deadpool 2 addresses head on. Harrow goes on to say,
But she was betrayed
Was she?
by indolent, fellow gods.
Oh,
By even her own avatar.
avatars, blue people. Love that film.
By avatar.
You mean that?
What I mean.
Anime.
Yeah, Steven references both James Cameron's Avatar and Avatar The Last Airbender, but also setting up the mystery of who Ammit's original avatar was and why they betrayed Ammit. Perhaps influences from the Eternals, or maybe Pharaoh Rama Tut, aka Kang the Conqueror, who also judges people by their futures. When Harrow tries to assess Steven's soul, Ammit's scales never settle.
There's chaos in you.
That's because Steven has
Chaos
a completely
magic bunda.
different moral alignment than Mark does. And the destiny of this total individual is really a complete variable depending on whoever is taking control. Now, would that mean that anyone with dissociative identity disorder that Harrow assessed would get the same result? Maybe, but I really think Steven and Mark's condition is amplified by Khonshu's possession, making him uniquely impossible to judge. That night as the museum closes, the crescent moon glimmers overhead, foretelling this as the night Moonknight will finally rise. Steven passes his reflections and the two others remain in the glass. Mark turning back to see what is stalking Steven, in this case the jackal that moves in the foreground, a jackal released by Arthur Harrow to recover the scarab. In another shot, Steven is perfectly framed behind a half-broken bust. It's a really cool way of showing how he is sharing his mind with one of these ancient figures. The jackal appears again behind statues.
Fascinating.
Its eyes
Fascinating.
glowing. Super creepy. Steven flees into the largest and nicest public museum bathroom I've ever seen.
Yes.
Seriously.
Save us.
But I can't have you fighting me this time.
You need to give me control. You understand? What control of what? What are you talking about? That thing's about to break through the door.
I love how for all of this, we stay in one take, transitioning through whip pans, but staying in Steven's point of view. At first, the Mark reflection turns to face him while all the other infinite Steven reflections match Steven's movement. But after Steven turns to look at the door and then back to Mark, now only the Mark reflection is there.
Oh, shit.
The other infinite identities in this mind, but Mark has the full attention right now.
I love that.
And then the music cuts out as he says,
That's so cool.
You're not gonna die. Let me save us.
And so, Steven finally looks directly at Mark into his eyes, and the transformation begins. Though notice, while the mummy wrappings envelop our Mark/Steven, in the mirror reflections on the side, nothing is happening. Again, from the standpoint of objective reality, it's hard to really know how much of this is truly real. Flickering on the bathroom walls are glowing hieroglyphics.
Weird.
Then we cut to outside the bathroom, initially hearing the scuffle, but then Sink crashes against the wall, and the jackal tries to flee, but Moonknight drags him back in. Water pouring down from the broken sinks, giving us another mirrored surface to reflect his character from below. He turns to us, glowing white eyes from behind the mummy wrappings and a hood with a crescent moon sigil and a beaked tip of that hood, evoking the skull of Khonshu. Suspended in his chest, in those mummy wrappings, is his crescent moon weapon. Our final image of the episode leaves us with Moonknight's eyes, glowing white like the moon. The color white is important to Moonknight, described amazingly in Charlie Houston's 2006 comics. I don't wear white to hide myself. I wear it so they'll see me coming, so they'll know who it is. Because when they see white, it doesn't matter how good a target I am. Their hands shake so bad they couldn't hit the moon. I just love how this fear for the glowing eyes of the jackal, and it ends with the jackal being afraid of its prey taking on the glowing, terrifying eyes of the hunter. Again, check out our awesome Moonknight merch over at NewRockstarsMerch.com.
Is that the one?
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter.
You'll never know.
Is that the one you got?
Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Great job. Two things. I wonder, like, how far into the whole Fight Club thing they'll go to the point of, damn, was a lot of what we saw just in his mind? How crazy would that be? And secondly, you'll never know what shirt it is that I bought. I'm never even gonna wear it on camera.
Oh, dang it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a hell of a journey. And we'll catch you for the next Moonknight episode. Thank you, New Rockstars.